The night was colder than usual, and the rain came down in relentless sheets, drumming against the worn-out roof of Ethan Cole's small rental house. Inside, the single father sat beside his sleeping son, Jake, a frail 7-year-old who had been battling asthma since birth. Ethan checked the inhaler once more before laying it carefully on the bedside table. His shift as a private security guard had ended 2 hours ago, and his body ached, but rest didn't come easy for a man constantly at war with both the world and his past. Once, Ethan had been a decorated Marine, sharp, fearless, loyal. But after his wife's sudden death and his honorable discharge, the world lost color. Now, he spent his nights guarding empty buildings, drunk businessmen, and the kind of people who never learned his name. Still, he did it all for Jake. That Friday night, Ethan got an unexpected call from his boss at Aegis Private Security. "Cole, emergency detail. VIP transport from the Fairmont Hotel to the airport. Pays triple. You in?" Ethan didn't hesitate. Jake's medication was running low, and the landlord had hinted about raising the rent again. "Send the details," Ethan said, pulling on his damp uniform. When he arrived at the Fairmont, the atmosphere was tense. Several black SUVs lined the driveway, and a few men in suits spoke hurriedly into earpieces. Then Ethan noticed something strange, a group of uniformed police officers blocking the hotel exit, their vehicles' lights flickering red and blue in the rain. His supervisor, a gruff man named Klein, motioned him over. "You'll be led vehicle. VIP's in trouble. Get him to the safe location, no questions." "Got it." Ethan nodded, even though questions burned in his mind. He'd done enough shady jobs to know that curiosity could be dangerous. Moments later, the hotel doors burst open. A tall man in a dark overcoat emerged, flanked by 2 nervous assistants. Ethan recognized him immediately, Richard Vance, Billionaire CEO of Vance Tech Industries. His face was plastered across every business magazine in the country. But right now, he didn't look like the man who ruled empires. He looked terrified. "Move," Klein barked. "Cops want him for questioning, but this is private business. Get him out before they can make it official." Ethan's instincts screamed this isn't right, but training took over. He opened the rear door of his SUV and motioned Vance inside. As soon as the billionaire ducked in, Ethan floored the accelerator. Behind them, sirens wailed. "Cole, they're pursuing." Klein's voice cracked through the radio. Ethan swerved through the rain-soaked streets, his hands steady on the wheel. "What did he do?" he asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Vance's expression was unreadable. "Nothing you'd believe," he said quietly. "The police vehicles gained on them." Ethan cut through a narrow alley, tires screeching. "If this is some corporate mess." "Someone inside my company set me up," Vance interrupted. "They framed me for embezzlement and bribery. If they get to me first, I won't live long enough to prove my innocence." Ethan looked back again, reading the desperation in his eyes. He'd seen men lie to survive, but something about Vance's fear felt real, raw, human. Minutes later, they hit a police checkpoint blocking the highway. Ethan cursed. He had 2 choices, surrender or risk everything. Jake's face flashed in his mind. He slammed the brakes, spun the wheel, and shot down an unmarked service road leading toward the industrial district. Rain blinded him, but instinct guided every turn. One police car clipped his rear bumper, sending sparks flying, yet Ethan didn't slow down. Finally, after 20 minutes of high-speed chaos, they lost the chase and pulled into an abandoned warehouse. Both men sat in silence, the sound of rain filling the space between them. Vance exhaled. "You just risked your life for a stranger." Ethan shrugged. "You're a client. That's my job." Vance gave a faint smile. "Not anymore. You did more than any hired man would." Before Ethan could reply, Vance pulled out a small flash drive from his coat pocket. "This holds everything, proof of the setup. If anything happens to me, take it to the press. You're the only one I can trust right now." Ethan hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you don't look at me like I'm worth billions," Vance said quietly. "You look at me like a man." By morning, the chaos had subsided. News stations reported that Richard Vance had been detained for questioning but was later released. Ethan didn't know what had happened after they parted ways at dawn. He had left Vance near a private airfield and returned home before Jake woke up. He thought that was the end of it. Until the next day. Ethan was repairing his old truck when a distant roar echoed down the street. Engines. Dozens of them. He looked up, and froze. An endless line of luxury cars, Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, turned onto his cracked little road. Neighbors peeked out of windows, mouths agape. The convoy stopped right outside his modest home. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped out of the lead car and approached. Ethan's hand instinctively went to his sidearm. "Mr. Cole," the man said, smiling. "Mr. Vance requests your presence." Ethan blinked. "He what?" Before he could ask further, one of the car doors opened, and Richard Vance himself emerged, looking calm, polished, and very much in control. Cameras weren't around this time. Just his quiet, commanding presence. "Morning, Ethan," Vance said, extending a hand. "I owe you my life." Ethan wiped his hands and shook it reluctantly. "You don't owe me anything. I was just doing my job." Vance smiled faintly. "You went beyond that, and I repay debts." With a gesture, he motioned toward the convoy. "These aren't for show. They're yours. Well, one of them is. Take your pick. The rest are here for a delivery." Ethan frowned. Delivery. Within minutes, a team of men in black began unloading crates from several cars, brand new appliances, furniture, and even a massive hospital-grade air filtration system. Then came the real surprise, a shiny blue SUV parked right in front of his old truck. Jake ran out, barefoot, his eyes wide with awe. "Dad, are those real?" Vance knelt beside him with a kind smile. "They are. And this one's for you and your dad." Ethan stood speechless. "You don't have to." "I do," Vance interrupted. "The night you saved me, you didn't ask for money, or fame, or even answers. You did the right thing because it was right. That kind of man is rare." The billionaire glanced around at the stunned neighbors, then added softly, "When I was your son's age, a man like you once saved my father. I never forgot. Now, I'm just returning the favor." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes. "Thank you, sir," he said, hugging his dad's leg. Vance smiled, then handed Ethan an envelope. "This is a position at my company, head of private security. Salary's more than fair. Full benefits, medical for Jake included. I won't take no for an answer." Ethan stared at the envelope, the paper trembling in his hand. He wanted to refuse out of pride, but when he looked down at his son's hopeful face, the words died in his throat. "All right," he said finally. "But only if I earn it." Vance chuckled. "You already have." The billionaire left soon after, the convoy roaring back toward the city, leaving behind stunned neighbors and one man who could barely believe his luck. Weeks passed, and Ethan began his new role. He quickly learned that Vance had indeed been framed by a trusted partner, now under federal investigation. The evidence Ethan had protected helped clear his name completely. But something deeper changed too. Vance didn't just hire Ethan, he became a friend. Jake was enrolled in one of the best schools, his medical needs fully covered. For the first time in years, Ethan could breathe without feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, Ethan found himself on the balcony of Vance Tech headquarters, watching the lights flicker below. Vance joined him, sipping coffee. "You ever wonder why life throws strange people together?" Vance asked. Ethan smirked. "All the time." Vance nodded. "You know, when the police were chasing me, I thought it was over. But then I realized, sometimes you need someone who has nothing to gain to remind you what matters." Ethan looked down at the bustling streets. "And sometimes, the world gives back, when you least expect it." Vance smiled faintly. "You saved my life, Ethan. But you also saved something else, my faith in people." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. The memory of that stormy night still lingered, the flashing lights, the chase, the impossible choices. He didn't know why he'd trusted Vance back then, only that his gut had told him it was right. And now, as he watched Jake playing in the company courtyard below, laughing, healthy, free, Ethan realized something profound. Sometimes, the world does notice the quiet heroes. They just have to drive through the storm first. That night, when Ethan returned home in the sleek blue SUV, neighbors still whispered about the day. 200 luxury cars showed up, on their tiny street. But for Ethan Cole, it wasn't about the cars, the job, or the money. It was about something far rarer, redemption, trust, and a second chance at life. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the scars and exhaustion, the soldier finally felt peace.